LSU-Alabama. Not nearly as much juice in the past, but it's still a prime time matchup. And we'll talk about that right now. He is the editor for Roll Tide Wire, part of the USA Today Sports Network. That is AJ Spurr. AJ, how's it going, brother?
Doing pretty good over here on this end. How about yourself, boss?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Just out here enjoying the weather because it's been absolutely – it's not like it's pretty darn cool outside right about now. It feels like actual football weather in November. That's always a good thing. But first things first, looking at the Alabama Crimson Tide, how surprised were you to see them land at that number 2 slot in the initial college football playoff poll? I know it amounts to a hill of beans when it comes to the end game and the end conversation about where teams wind up come December, but that was something that got stuck in a lot of people's craw.
It did, and I don't think it got as much attention as it necessarily deserved because I don't think they should have been placed in at number 2. But having Oregon there at number 4, Cincinnati dropped down all the way to 6. There were a couple other storylines there that I think grasped a lot of people's attention instead of Alabama at number 2. At this point, a lot of people just kind of accept the fact that either Alabama is going to be at or near the top, whether or not the masses believe they deserve it or not. I do think they should have been top 4, especially considering where the CFP committee had Texas A&M, Alabama's lone loss, ranked. But top 2, I don't necessarily think so. I think Michigan State is a really solid team right now. Their offense seems very, very explosive. Kenneth Walker, in my opinion, Heisman frontrunner. That team should have been number 2. Alabama, maybe 3 or 4, depending on where you rank. Oklahoma with Caleb Williams, which that I totally forgot to mention, blew my mind over there at number 8. But Alabama fans know this is just the initial rankings. It's going to come down at the end of the day, assuming Alabama can run the table here in the regular season, that it's going to come down to that final game in Atlanta, most likely against Georgia.
It's so crazy, and it was kind of almost like they threw out a bunch of other smoke screens. The College Football Playoff Committee did, to where we weren't talking about the surprise that Alabama was number 2. Everybody was talking about Cincinnati, Oregon over Ohio State. It was all that, and then obviously Oklahoma is also standing at 8. Even though I feel like I agree with that ranking more than anything, but it just felt like, oh, Alabama's number 2, okay, but what about Cincinnati? It felt like everybody else was talking about that. Nobody really cared that Alabama was in the top number 2 behind Georgia.
Mm-hmm. No, if that was their goal, let me tell you, they did it, and especially with leaving UTSA out completely of their top 25, and also having Mississippi State as high as they did. So, those 2 alone were what got me rolling. I didn't even bother watching 15 through 10 when they posted those, because just seeing UTSA and Mississippi State unranked and ranked that highly respectively, the rest of it was, in my opinion, kind of hogwash. So we'll have to wait and see over these next few weeks how the games pan out and how the scope of things narrows. So it's all a waiting game at this point.
Exactly. Talking right now, AJ Spurr, managing editor for Roll Tide Wire. Now we're going to get to the actual contest itself. And I'm wondering, because over here I feel like the vibe isn't necessarily there, but what's it like in T-Town, where this game every single year it's marked on the calendar, and to me, heading into this, it's a lot like 2020. There's just not nearly as much juice on this course as normal,
It's really, really interesting because last season you would think would kind of be the revenge game for what happened in Tuscaloosa back in 2019. And though Alabama won, it was almost like this insatiable thirst for, blood from Alabama fans. And now that fans are allowed back into the stadiums full capacity, it's back in Tuscaloosa. They know this is going to be Coach O's last time on the sidelines in Bryant-Denny Stadium. This game, from an Alabama fan perspective, is massive. And not from the standpoint of, well, are we going to win or not, and how important this game is, but how many points they'll be able to run up. I mean, I'm not sure what's going on inside the program, but hearing Nick Saban talk about disrespect as a motivating factor leading into a game is, very unlike him to discuss what it is about a particular game other than the fact that it's a, important game, which we get from him just about every other press conference. And then also bringing back up when Coach O kind of did this as well when he walked back those comments he made back in 2019 in the locker room that were filmed by accident and shown to the world. Alabama fans felt disrespected. It was on their home turf. We're back on home turf now, and fans are allowed back into the stadium. So this is probably the most excited I've seen an Alabama, fan base excited for a game in a very, very long time.
That's interesting to hear, and you just brought up something that I kind of have to agree with. It's like, you think about it. This team a couple years ago basically went into your house and beat you down to a pulp. I don't know what happened there. Looks like we lost AJ. Going to go ahead and try and get him to call back. Looks like we lost him there, so we're going to go ahead and try and get him back on because we were having a good conversation. Looks like we got him back. AJ, you back with us?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. I just wanted to make sure because we lost you there for a second. But no, I'm with you. I think there was something to be said about what you saw from that contest at LSU-Alabama where they just basically came into your house and just slapped you around for 4 quarters of a ball game. Yes, the score got a little bit closer, but that first half, you just LSU completely outclassed them. And then you have the post-game comments to where basically you're like the Big Lebowski, and those guys walk into the dude's house and they pee on their rug. It's like, you don't pee on another guy's rug. It ties the room together. And now you get an opportunity to kind of get even more revenge. And he brought it up, it's like, and yeah, I think Nick Saban, the fact that they had a loss earlier this year, that's probably even more of a motivating factor because the second he gets a loss, it seems like he just like tightens the ship up a lot more.
Exactly. And one of Nick Saban's, best qualities as a head coach and the reason why his teams, regardless of where he goes, are so successful is discipline. And something we've seen this season in particular for some reason is just a lack of discipline. There doesn't seem to be that strong sense of cohesiveness on both sides of the ball, especially on the defense. And no one is really quite sure where to point the finger. Who does this fall on? Is it the fact that it's a rather young team and maybe lacks leadership on the roster itself and in the locker room? Or is it just the fact that maybe, Nick Saban doesn't feel this team is, quote unquote, the chosen one, that can take the Crimson Tide all the way to a national championship and bring home number 19 for the program. So I completely agree with you there that this team does look different. However, after that Texas A&M game, some things have been tightened up. It's just a question of now, is it tight enough to get them all the way?
What can you say about Bryce Young? Because, you've had this situation where the last few years, a lot of high-caliber quarterbacks have come out of the University of Alabama. Mac Jones, a big point of contention. You see what he's doing. Tua Tagovailoa as well with the Miami Dolphins. What can you say about what Bryce Young's been able to do? 26 passes for that quarterback this year, the most in the SEC and 4th most in the nation. How big is this game for him? And more importantly, could this be that Heisman Trophy-esque game for him to where he could really make a big statement on a massive platform like the Four Letter Network?
Well, first off, on the Heisman, topic there with Bryce, we've heard this for years, recent years rather, with Mac Jones and Tua, where these quarterbacks have so much success on the field, and it's just regular success. You almost expect it week in and week out. There's a big question of where is that Heisman moment going to come from? If you're never really down in the game at any point throughout the season, if you're never the underdog, at what point do you look at this player and say, okay, he just, came back and won this game for his team, or look at how special he is. If it's a team effort and they're always winning or always finding success, where does that moment come from? Now, with Bryce Young, he came in as Alabama's highest-rated quarterback recruit in program history. So it's weird to say that the expectations for him, weren't all the way to the moon. However, he somehow exceeded expectations this season. Being a first-year starter at Alabama after only playing in 9 games last season, and most of them were really just garbage time touches, he's gone out there this season and shown what he's capable of. I mean, his 2023 NFL draft stock is something I keep a very close eye on with Roll Tide Wire, and every week it seems to be going up and up and up. It's crazy to think how, he can improve leading into next season, considering what he's been able to do as far as improvements in this season. Earlier on against Florida, there were a lot of questions raised about his decision-making abilities. Can he even run the ball? Is he comfortable running the ball, especially in the red zone? As the season's gone on, we've seen his decision-making abilities progress, as have we seen his run game progress and really develop, especially in the red zone. He seems a lot more comfortable running the ball in, taking a few more hits. And being a mobile quarterback, that's something you would expect from him.
I'd have to agree with you. Talking right now with our guy, AJ Spurr, part of Roll Tide Wire, which is part of the USA Today Sports Network. But I'm just blown away by how much this team has been, absolutely dominant outside of the A&M game. But LSU, it just feels like they are obviously outmanned and outgunned. Who do you think is going to be the biggest key to victory? Is it going to be more on the defensive side of the football to kind of get Max Johnson's cage rattled? Because I feel like the offense is going to kind of do what they need to do, especially when you look at LSU and they're lost damn near every single starter they had at the beginning of the year. It feels like it's going to be more about the defense kind of rattling the cage of one Max Johnson.
Well, the offense, as long as Alabama's offense can go out there and do what they've done every single game, some better than others, but if they can go out there and put at least an average performance, then from what they've shown this season, I think they'll be fine. I'm going to agree with you 100% here. I think it's going to come down to the defense. Getting to Max Johnson, especially with Will Anderson, is going to be very important. But getting to Davis Price, this Alabama run defense has struggled this year. We look up front, DJ Dale, Fedarian Mathis. These are guys Alabama fans had a lot of hope for, especially DJ Dale, who I believe is in his second year as a starter at nose tackle, and he just hasn't really shown what we saw from him in high school as a recruit coming into the program, an in-state product. So a lot of people were very excited about him, and he's improved little by little every season, but he hasn't had that star quality a lot of people thought he would have. It just seems like the one weakness for this Alabama team, aside from penalties in the secondary, is the inability to at least limit the run game. And whether it be a QB run or, somebody like Davis Price who can do some very serious damage to a defensive front, Alabama's going to have to tighten up and get it going and stay strong.
AJ, thank you so much for coming on, my man. We'll talk to you down the road and enjoy yourself tonight. It's a little bit different, though, that this isn't a CBS game. It's so weird because it's been a long time. I think since Nick Saban was the first year as a head coach, it's not on CBS.
Yeah, not hearing Gary Danielson on it is going to be a little bit weird. But you know what? I think we'll all adjust
live
just for this one game.
We'll all live for this one. Now, obviously, in a few years, once the CBS deal lapses, this will always be a 4-letter network game. So I think this is that trial run to where we finally don't have to hear Gary Danielson on a Saturday night calling LSU-Bama.
That's right.
Take it easy, man.
You do the same.